Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right now I am joined by the most full throttle man I have ever encountered. It's Tony Anderson.
Hello Craig, how are we?
On today's show we are going to be picking over the bones of Scotland's 3-1 friendly defeat to Iceland at Hampden on Friday night. Andre Johnson's early opener was cancelled out by John Souttar, but an own goal from Lewis Ferguson right before half-time and a Victor Paulsen header shortly after the restart saw Scotland slump to defeat. It was a bleak night for the national team. Just over 30,000 punters turned up to watch a pretty stodgy, pretty unimaginative performance. Very few positives to take from the evening and plenty of disappointment. So Tony, give me your shoot thoughts on Scotland 1, Iceland 3.
I mean, it couldn't have went much worse. It's almost like you're looking back on it and you're thinking that these friendlies were always like a hide into nothing. After the season has gone, after the performances that we've had in recent times, it's almost like this is now, rightly or wrongly, going to get blown possibly into proportion, maybe. Actually, it's like another nail, it feels like, in the coffin that we probably could have done without going into this.
I think you're right. I think that even for a friendly, I think this was a must-win game for Scotland. I think the games against Iceland and Liechtenstein, I remember at the time thinking, they're pretty low stakes. They're certainly doable, especially the Liechtenstein game. But I think after the past 12 months, and especially after the Nations League playoff defeat against Greece, I think Steve Clarke especially really needed a victory here. And I think that the nature of the performance, both collectively and individually, will have alarmed him. Certainly alarmed the people that stayed to the very end to boo the team off the park. That was I think after the Greece game, there was a smattering of boos, but this was pretty much everyone left inside the ground booed the team off the park. And it's a concern here, especially with the World Cup qualifiers coming up on the horizon in September.
Yeah, and obviously you see the usual stuff that gets labelled at Clarke. You know, it always boils into shape. It always seems to be like the number one argument between Scotland fans. And what I would say is much more worrying than that is I actually think because of the way the Scotland squad is made up, that we quite literally have to have two shapes that we use depending on who's available. And that's the way that we can be our best. And with him being in charge for 6 years, we should now be quite easily able to jump between the two shapes, and it shouldn't take away from the fundamentals of the Scotland team. It shouldn't take away from whether we can be attacking or defensive or not, because there's been so long within that. And the biggest worry for Clarke now is it doesn't seem to matter what shape we're using. We've now lost all the fundamentals that make Scotland great. We don't run teams off the park. We don't suffocate teams to death. We don't just constantly ask questions and just grind teams down, which is really what we were. We were quite spectacular at. And without Doak there, we don't have anyone that can drag us out of a bad sort of performance and just do something like that. So now it's the performance or nothing. And it's starting to get to the stage now that they're becoming very, very little evidence that Scotland team's going to produce that performance anywhere near enough to have any success.
It's quite alarming, the quotes from the Iceland manager after the game, who said, we were expecting Scotland to set up in a 4-2-3-1, which they've been doing recently, so I was surprised to see them go back to the 3-5-2 formation. And I suppose it ties into what you're saying about systems, because as we've all known, that the whole point of the 3-4-2-1 system, certainly the back three that Scotland have been utilising, is to get Ciaran Tierney and Andy Robertson into the team. And I don't like saying it, but I think that, because I love the guy, but I think Ciaran Tierney's performance last night was quite alarming in terms of what, if you go back, we said this a lot, but you go back like 4 years ago to the Euros against Czech Republic, that opening game when Ciaran Tierney wasn't available, you're thinking, oh my goodness, we are really going to struggle with him. He was the key man that really knitted that whole system together. And you see him here, it's all predisposed in him being able to motor up and down the park, give Andy Robertson an underlap. So that left side was so potent and so explosive. And I'm not sure if he's able to do that anymore. And I think that it was he looked quite a diminished presence out in the pitch. He wasn't the only one, but I think he's been such an important player for Scotland. And yes, I appreciate it's the end of a long season. It's a low stakes friendly, but it's the sort of performance you're watching that and you're thinking,
And there's a reason Ciaran Tierney is coming back to Celtic. The reality is, whether people like it or not, Celtic have been huckled by romance, and they're the only team that's willing to give Ciaran Tierney a 4-year deal. I'm probably thinking at 40 grand a week or something of that ilk.
Probably make their best paid player.
Yeah, and this isn't me blaming Ciaran Tierney or anything like that. He's playing the smart game with his agent, knowing that he needs to go somewhere safe, somewhere that will probably accept and not abuse the fact that he might only be able to play 15, 20 games in a season, and will give him some sort of longevity. Because Ciaran Tierney, the player, is way too good to be coming to play at Celtic in his late 20s. Miles too good. He should be playing for some of the best teams on the planet. We all know that. But the fact that he's doing that tells me I don't need to watch Ciaran Tierney to know that his powers must have been diminished for him to have made that decision. He's not done it because he wants to play for Celtic again. No chance.
I suppose as well that you compare the performance to Iceland. I actually thought Iceland were pretty good. And I thought what I liked about Iceland as well, they had a very clear way of playing. And it was they were going to be playing that ball out from the back regardless of how Scotland pressed them. There were a couple of times they got into a wee bit of bother. I'm sure the chance for when John McGinn clipped that ball up to the back post for George Hurst, the header, and he was a bit underneath the ball, and but I still think he could have done better. But nevertheless, that Scotland were able to break up the passing out from the back and were able to provoke that chance. However, on the whole, I thought Iceland were pretty handy with it. Forgive me, I can't remember the names of the players, but the number 8 thought I had a good game for them, dropping deep, and the goalkeeper was good with his feet. And there was a bit in the second half as well where Scotland really had them pegged back, even towards their corner flag, and they were still adamant on passing the ball out. And it wasn't like you're watching a sort of like an over-principled lower league side doing it, which you tend to see. This is like a well-coached, well-drilled team. And you can see for Scotland, it's been the end of a long, hard season. You know, you've had like Andy Robertson has won the league title with Liverpool. He's played about 50 games this season. Scott McTominay is the best player in Italy at the moment. He's had a long, hard season. He's been partying. But Iceland have had a long, hard season as well. A lot of their players are playing at a decent level. So they'll have gone through the same tumults that Scotland will have done, and they just look far more effervescent than we did. And it ties into what you're saying just about that. Like, even if Scotland don't necessarily have the quality to get at you, we can run over the top of you. And that just didn't happen at all last night.
And to twist, sort of like pull what you're saying about Iceland to the Scotland point of view, I would argue that a sort of weaker side playing that type of football should actually, at Hampden, should feed right into our most powerful aspects as a team. And we stood off them, which this is the bit that worries me is that the team who are doing that because of the long, hard season, or have they been told to do that? Because that might bleed into how we play at 3 at the back. But as I said earlier, we've played 3 at the back when we've been really, really attacking. You know, it's not like that it's been one way or the other in terms of where we play 3 at the back when we sit in and we play 4-2-3 when we're attacking. That's absolutely not the case when you talk about Scotland. But I mean, if you move into, and then you've got the other problems with Clarke now, is the loyalty starting to look like fetish with Grant Hanley.
Hanley's the one,
Like, I've never had a problem with Grant Hanley. I know he's been a bit of a poster boy, bizarrely, even though he's been pretty decent over the years for Scotland. He's had a pretty decent career, especially when we relate him to other Scottish defenders over his generation. But why he still does it's like he is deliberately trying to noise people up. It doesn't add up why a guy of Grant Hanley's age who doesn't even play at a very low level.
Birmingham.
It still plays. That doesn't add up as to making any sense on any level.
Yeah, but I think that I'd be interested to get your thoughts when you saw the team lines and the formation. It'd be interesting to know what you were thinking, because I think it was maybe as close to as strong a starting 11 that we could have named last night. Maybe you say that Shea Adams would have been playing ahead of George Hurst, maybe, and obviously Doak would have been in had he been injured, but you know what I mean. It's broadly as close to a strong starting 11 as Scotland could have fielded. And I think a lot of people, when they'd have seen Grant Hanley's name, would have been like, "What are we playing Grant Hanley for? What are we going to learn from this?" And I think that was it. And then funny as the game went into it, I remember coming to half time and thinking, in an ideal world, Clarke would have been 2-0 up, quite comfortable, and then you could have brought on Kieran Bowie, then you could have brought on Lennon Miller, but then you're going to have to keep playing Billy Gilmour, you're going to have to keep Scott McTominay, because we really need to dig out a result here. So you've got these tired boys that are still running around here.
It's like the worst type of scenario for all these people to be in.
Aye, so it'll be interesting. What were your thoughts when you saw that starting 11?
As I said, with the fact that Doak isn't available, Morgan isn't available. Gold isn't available. We are getting to the point where there is no actual wingers genuinely available. So I could see what I wasn't against Clarke going back to that formation, because as I said earlier, I feel like because of the holes in the team, we're trying to bring Johnson through, because that means that we've got an option when Hickey isn't available, and we've still no idea what if Aaron Hickey's the player he was. I mean, it was a very, very serious issue, so we do need to try and find that contingency plan. And if Doak isn't there and no other wingers, as it starts to be like, can you really play with all these wide players? We've just had Kieran Tierney back fit. We're probably checking into, you're probably trying to learn, is he still a viable option? Are we still worth playing that shape? So I still think there was a bit of inquisitiveness in that shape that people might be ignoring a bit, and the reason why he went it, because I still think there'll be periods where ultimately, to get the best players on the park on the pitch, which everyone wants Ferguson on the pitch, everyone wants Gilmour on the pitch, but then if you want McGinn and you want McTominay on the pitch, that pretty much means you're going to have to play the three at the back, to get them all on the pitch in positions where they can have a major impact. So I wasn't necessarily against going back to that shape. And like I said earlier, I'm seeing Max Johnson play. Hurst, I'm going to need a lot of convincing about Hurst. But that, again, I don't know if that's just me not liking a jobbing English striker rather than him not being better. It's like Adamida at Celtic, where I'm like, God, he needs to convince me. But if he came to Hibs, would he start? Probably. It's that world that I don't know if it's what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I've completely lost.
But I know what you mean, Tony. I know that the point you're saying, that's a very sort of holistic approach to looking at the starting 11 and what Clarke's trying to do. But when you look at that song and you're seeing Grant Hanley, I think he's at the stage now. I think Hanley's at the stage now for a lot of supporters. Just even seeing his name, that's got a triggering effect on him.
It does.
And I suppose as well it leads us on to what happened very early on in the match. I think Angus Gunn coming out to claim a cross, fell down, injured himself, and was replaced by Ciaran Slicker. And young guy, he's not made many first team appearances. I think he'd played last season in an FA Cup appearance briefly, a loan spell at Rochdale prior to that, not made appearances. Ruinously disastrous debut for Ciaran Slicker.
And this is where it comes into, when you talk about bringing players in who aren't meant to play to see what they're like in and around the training ground and stuff like that, I feel that's much easier to do with outfield players than it is with a goalkeeper, because what happened last night is something that can happen. Like, that is a possibility. And then it's like the most vulnerable position on the park is then shown out. And don't get me wrong, I know like Clarke and whoever if takes over for Clarke has a huge issue. And there's no magic wand for this one. We're going to be, I imagine someone's going to be hired to scroll through every single goalkeeper on the planet's family tree to see if there's anyone else that's option, because it is getting to that stage. Because let's be honest, Angus Gunn isn't even someone that everyone's overly enamoured with. It was an issue anyway, but he is competent. And maybe we get to the stage now is like, is there other more competent goalkeepers than Slicker that maybe could have avoided this scenario? Because funnily enough, it's like this knock-on effect. It's fucked Ciaran Slicker maybe for his career in terms of a Scotland career. I don't know about his wider career, but also it could be the knife that actually stabs Clarke in the end. It's like the one that's went over. It could be what seems like such an innocuous thing. Bringing in a young third choice goalkeeper could have like some overarching effect on so many people's careers.
Because of course, like Robbie McCrory, who would have been the second choice goalkeeper, the Kilmarnock goalie, he was injured in the warm-up, so Slicker was like promoted by default, and I think he is Scotland's fifth choice goalkeeper. So I saw some comments saying like, I can't believe Clarke's thrown the young boy in there. He had no choice. There's no one else to.
He did pick him.
Aye, there is no one else. I suppose the other goalkeeper is Callum McKenna, who looked very promising in his 9 games at Queen's Park in the Championship at the start of like the 23-24 season before moving on to Bournemouth. He was brought in to the development squad. He might be called up. There's saw the names mentioned. Nicky Hogarth, who was playing at Falkirk last season, might be in contention to be called. I think Clarke had said
Clarke or someone who's been around. I mean, I know he's not been playing much, but again, we're talking about someone who isn't maybe going to get shunted by the bright lights, and we don't want McKenna. You might be affecting another guy's career overall. That could be good. You can have really bad effects on people by doing what we're talking about doing.
But that was his second touch was a misplaced. I mean, it was a misplaced clearance, misplaced pass. I think that to level the blame at the goalkeeper directly, I think it's poor because I mean, I'll be honest. I was in the stadium. I was looking at my phone at the time, and when I looked up, the ball's in the back of the net. So I had to because it was just one of those ones where the goalkeeper's got the ball. Oh, he's booted up the park, and I was checking WhatsApp, and then all of a sudden, how the fuck did that happen? So I had to watch it back in the highlights, and it's not the most. It's an error in terms of you're playing the team into trouble with a clearance or a pass that I think was supposed to go to Tierney, didn't quite get there, and it's a great shot for Johnson. But I think could someone have come out and closed him down a little bit?
Terrible for that because he comes to close him down, he then turns sideways and makes himself completely smaller, and then opens up the only avenue to be able to put in the goal. And the funny thing with the whole Slicker thing at that point, but we gave him the ball 3 times back because they were obviously thinking, let's get him a few touches in the ball to make him feel better. And it caused, again, then this has such a seismic effect on so many things.
There was a bit, I think, that was his first touch was, I think he passed it to Robertson. Second touch was that botched clearance. I think his third touch was another botched clearance, and that was in the stadium. And it was like, I think that might have been the noisiest the crowd, the Scotland crowd, got at that up until Suter's equaliser. But yeah, and the second goal's calamitous. There are so many points of failure for it, and I know it's not necessarily Slicker's fault, but see. Like optics, like the way he dived over the top of the ball off the back of that mistake, it just looked bad. It looked a really bad goal to concede, even if it wasn't directly his fault. There's certainly nothing you can say to mitigate the third goal from Paulson.
Well, I mean, that's just like, I hate to do this, but that is quite simply 85% of that stadium saving it. That is the God's honest truth. It's a routine header down your throat, and you just. And don't get me wrong, most of us would parry it directly back into trouble.
You'd stop it from going in the goal.
You would stop it from going in the goal. I'm very confident I would be able to do that. And then it just looks like this guy doesn't look like a goalkeeper. You are starting to think, is it better for everyone if Kieran Bowie goes and goals? Is this where we've ended up? And it's just. And this is now going to mar his, like, the next 5 years of his career. I do feel sorry for him, even though I am making these jokes, but we've got to entertain as part of what we're here for.
I know I was speaking to, at half time, I was speaking to Jamie Borthwick, Robert Borthwick's brother, who appears on this podcast, and he mentioned Frank Haffey. I don't know, does that name ring any bells to you?
No.
Frank, well, I had to go and I was like, that name presses a buzzer. I went and looked him on Wikipedia. He made 2 appearances for Scotland. On his second appearances, it was a sort of this was in 1961, but the inexperienced Scotland side, they were losing 5-3 to England with 12 games to go. They ended up losing 9-3, and he was directly responsible for a lot of the goals and never played for Scotland again. And I think it's the performance has been described as, well, obviously not as dramatic as Haffey's collapse, but it's hard to remember as bad certainly a bad Scotland debut, but as bad a Scotland performance where someone has been certainly directly responsible for one of the goals and indirectly responsible for 2 of them. And in the second half, I think that's all he did, because by that point, Iceland have got that 2-goal advantage, quite happy to knock the ball about. They could slow the game down. They could speed it up when Scotland were putting a bit of heat on them. Very comfortable for Iceland. And that's all Slicker did in the entire second half, was flap at that ball and have to pull it out his net.
That last half hour was like, just blow the whistle, man. I've never seen anyone wanting to leave so much. No one's trying to do anything to push themselves. I don't know why Clarke didn't make subs sooner to try and stop that malaise and bring on all the debutants who've got something to gain, like to get the guys off of it, like, so they've got something to gain to try and manoeuvring that. But that's the other thing that worries, is that you start looking at Clarke as a man sort of just staring into space of like, is there any point? And that starts to like engulf that whole second half performance. It all felt like this is all completely pointless. And when you're an international manager, that's terrible because you only get so many times with the players, and that's something you're trying to avoid at all costs, that sort of feeling.
I think the second half subs came in about, I need to double check, it was about 70 minutes or so. I think it was when you got to see that he made the triple sub, when Miller, Conway and McKenna all came on. And I think at that point with Paulson scoring, it was about 52 minutes, I would have liked to have just seen, right there, let's fucking make a change here. Because it's funny because there's some stuff you shouldn't listen to fans. Ultimately, that's why we are just talking shite about it the day after. And we're not the ones picking the team. We're not the ones coaching the team. But there comes a thing where even if it's a friendly, like, the optics matter for these things, and people want to see a change, because by that point there was people were leaving the ground about, like, not long after that goal, about the hour mark. Like, having been working for Scotland for the last since 2019, and obviously I've been doing it regularly since fans were allowed back in the ground. That's nearly 4 years where I've been working regularly with Scotland. I've never seen that at Hampden, people leaving, one, it to be as quiet as it was, and then two, the people to start filtering out and that. And I don't know, it's easy thing to say in hindsight, but I don't know if making the changes, giving Miller a shot, bringing Bowie on, given some degree of freshness, would have kept him in the ground and have kept people invested. I don't know.
I think that sometimes it is important. That's what I mean. When you're at this end of season, when you're in this bad form, sometimes it is about buying yourself a break. And like, almost like doing the obvious things for preservation of your squad. Because obviously their heads are gone. You've got loads of guys there that I'm not blaming anyone. These guys are some of the most professional guys in the world, but definitely their heads will have started drifting to Dubai or Ibiza. And fair play, because you're in a terrible situation. It must be horrible, and you will. And they're only human beings. That will happen after all that. So you can save them from that, and then also do yourself a favour, a bit of self-preservation as well. Like, this is what people want to see right now. There's nothing else on the line here. It is just about trying to make people feel better and to build some sort of momentum. That's all that matters now. That's all you've got at that stage.
But I suppose for Clarke as well, that's perhaps something that's really admirable about him, and something that's quite frustrating about him. He's just so bloody minded.
Yeah.
Do you know, that's why, like I said earlier, that's why he's picking the team. And it's not just like he's checking what people are saying on social media. It's like, fuck, folk want Lennon Miller. Lennon, down you come. There's Daft Davy 67 thinks we should bring you on, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. You know, I'd say one nice thing for the evening. I mean, there were not many positives. I was trying to write down the positives. I thought that Max Johnson had some decent deliveries. Of course, it was his corner kick that John Suter got the equaliser from. You know, I was trying to make a list of the positives last night, and there was a nice moment where, like, Lennon Miller was introduced. Now, his dad, Lee, was at the game. And I've met Lee from a view from the terrace, and I've done the BBC Sports Scotland podcast with him, and he's a really, really nice guy, super enthusiastic. And obviously, when you're basically getting asked about how great your son is all the time, it's really easy to do. It's probably the easiest job in the world. And there was a nice bit where I was sitting quite a good few rows behind him, and I could see him film down. He was like filming his son coming on, and he had to wait for ages because the players were all lined up. It took a long time for the ball to actually go out of play for them to bring them on, and so that was a great moment for him to see him come on. And at the end, I'd said all right to him at half time, and at full time I was going to say, like, cheerio to him, but I could see him, like, looking out onto the pitch and watching the players come into the tunnel, and I could see his eyes were a wee bit moist. And I thought, I don't need to. That's his moment, and that's class. Like, Lennon Miller, we all know, is a player of really rich potential, so it was great to see him get his debut. And I think he's going to be the fulcrum of Scotland's midfield going forward. And it was a nice moment for him and a nice moment for his family. But that's probably the only positive that I can say from the game.
Going back to your point about Max Johnson, there's something that getting him a run. Because obviously, as I said, we've got biggest holes in our team are if Hickey doesn't come back to full fitness. I feel like I still don't know if Patterson's good enough. I still don't know what, like I think Patterson's got parts that are good, but I still don't know for sure. And it's been quite a long time now due to injury and loss of form and not playing for Everton. And we've got centre half and goalkeeper, right? So we've got these. So it was nice to see like Max Johnson come in going like, they're maybe going to, even if he's not a world beater, he's going to be more than good enough to not be a gaping hole, because with the goalkeeper situation, it is now getting like 3 gaping holes becomes nearly impossible. And it's all in the same part of the pitch. It starts to become impossible to hide that, regardless about how good the rest of the team is. So I think it's a little bit of your own sanity when you're watching it is, right, okay, it looks like we're going to be okay in that position, even if the best thing that could happen is Hickey coming back to being the player that he really looked like he was, because we do forget, Hickey looked fucking brilliant. We're talking about a guy, 2-footed, cultured, very un-Scottish type of player, a very modern fullback, like not just about overlapping, a guy that comes to the side and all that. It was like tactically a dream for a manager to have, because you can use him in so many ways. And I genuinely did believe that Hickey was probably on the verge, due to not just his ability, but all those other things I just said about the tactical side of it, probably going to a really big club because he's just so useful.
Was he not linked with Manchester City at one point? Because like, for all the reasons that you've given there, just that he is just a very versatile, very tactically intelligent player that can offer so much. And I remember his debut, I think, what was his debut against Ukraine? Thinking that World Cup playoff, and he wasn't particularly impressive then, but he's really, really grown into the role. And I think that I agree with you about Patterson. I think Patterson had, what I'd really liked about Patterson in his early days with Scotland, he had like a real fearlessness and a gallousness to him. I mean, it wouldn't matter. He would give the ball away or make a mistake. Didn't matter. He would just try and win it back and then go again. But I think he has been usurped by Hickey, who is, as we just described, as a more complete player. But I thought Johnson did fine. You know, I think that he wasn't spectacular. Good deliveries, but in terms of the sort of the verve that you would look for from your fullback, you're not necessarily going to, or your wing back even. I'm not sure if he's going to give it to you, but a credible option all the same. But that's it. There's the 2 options. Lennon Miller, coming on and seeing his dad's reaction. That was class. Max Johnson's corner. That was it. And it's a funny one, Tony, because yes, it's a friendly game. So ultimately, it doesn't count. It doesn't count. So Scotland could have won that match 10-0. What does it matter? Scotland lost it 10-0. It doesn't matter. But just in the context of where we are at the moment, especially over the past 12 months, like I said at the start, it felt like a must-win game for Clarke. And I think that even there seems to be like people who are adamant that Clarke should have moved on after the Euros. I think there was a lot of people quite like unhappy with the lack of contrition after the Euros. If you remember where he was speaking afterwards, and I think people were looking for a sort of mea culpa and say, see the game against Hungary, got it wrong. You know, that wasn't flexible with substitutions, could have changed things a wee bit earlier. We could have been a lot bit better.
Made the same mistake I made last time when Tierney wasn't fit. I stuck with it. You know, there was a lot, and this was always a problem. There's things that you can lead back to Clarke that do land at his door quite specifically and clearly. And like you're saying, the bloody mindedness, he won't do that. And again, that's not quite a normal trait for a good manager. And don't get me wrong, but again, it's where do you go? Like, we've got this big gaping hole in goals, but there's also a gaping hole in who takes Clarke's place, because there isn't an obvious option anywhere. Because people used to say like Derek McInnes, but all I thought was all we'd be doing is replacing Clarke with almost his twin in terms of how he plays and everything he does, but on a slightly lower level. So that would be absolutely like mental way to go. So it feels like it's going to have to be a left field appointment. And I can't say that the SFA fills you with absolute like faith that would be the kind of appointment that they would ace, to be honest.
I saw some people saying we should go for Ange Postecoglou.
If they're willing to pay £10 million a year, I don't see them doing that.
No,
and also, but I would enjoy it, and there'd be parts of that team that would thrive brilliantly under Postecoglou. But that defence playing a high line. Oh, the suicidal highlight. I don't know. But seeing McGinn and McTominay and Ferguson press teams to death with like Bowyer side, that side, I think he would make brilliantly. So, sure, but it would be fun. And maybe sometimes life's about having fun.
Oh, at least it's actually being able to talk about the game. That's fun. That's certainly more fun than being at it. But I was working at Hampden last night. You've been there, Tony. In fact, you were there for the best one of the lot of them. You were there for the Spain game. That was
Spain game, and I got to see my mate working before it in the thing.
We were sitting next to each other when McTominay got his second goal. So it was amazing getting to actually celebrate what is probably the apex of Steve Clarke Scotland beating the team that actually went on to win the tournament. And I know that they made a number of changes and all that, and only I think it was like 4 players from that actual squad. Who gives a fuck? It was brilliant.
And they're about to go win the Nations League as well, so it'll be a follow-on.
That was amazing. That was certainly epic. So our guest for that was David Marshall, and I think David Marshall was class, like a really good talker, really interesting perspective, and what a career he's had both at like club level and for the national team. And there's been a lot of like highs and lows as well. You know, the penalty save against Serbia, and then which is incredible. And then subsequently, that's one of the questions I asked him, how was Euro 2020 for you? He said, other than getting lobbed for the halfway line, it was actually all right. He had quite a good sense of humour about it. But a lot afterwards, he came back into the lounge at the end, and I think that everyone had gone up to see him, had said all right to him and said, listen, you bring your gloves with you or stuff like that. I said, you fancy coming back out of retirement for that? In fact, just a good Hibs related one. I was talking to him about, like, so what you do now, what does your role involve with Hibs? And he was talking about it. I said, when you saw Joseph Bursick's performance last season, you don't fancy pulling the gloves back on? And I didn't to give a diplomatic answer. No, I'm kidding on, mate. I'm kidding on. You don't need to answer that. But that's sort of the feeling. It was all. I mean, we're all joking about it. It was a real sort of like gallows humour, because that's all you really have.
Back to this, are we? We got 2 years of not doing it, and now we're back to our old characteristics.
But you're looking on current form. I mean, we had a strong finish to the Nations League campaign. You know, I thought good performances against Croatia, a spirited showing against Portugal to hold them to a draw. It just feels like on current form.
Could you see us a decent performance, especially in the first half?
I mean, I thought it was a good result, but we could have easily lost that match. You know, and it feels like on current form, could you see us beating Greece and Denmark, and maybe Belarus could give us a bloody nose?
This is the problem as well, is that the group's quite small. So it's like a small group. So there's not games to build momentum.
There's no margin for error.
There's no games to build momentum in, which we've had in other groups, I think, where it's like we can get a few wins under our belt, feeling good about ourselves. Then a team's coming at a raucous Hampden, you know, and then you're then you're cooking with gas. And this, it's like you're going to be straight in with 2 away games. And it just feels like I think Clarke will end up getting sacked midway through the World Cup campaign.
Well, then there's the question then, Tony, is would you replace Steve Clarke after the Liechtenstein game?
It's one of those. It's a double-edged sword. Is I probably would. I think we are at the end of the days, and one thing that's been impressive about Clarke is he's been able to. We've had the dips and lows before, and we've come back again, and but I'm really getting the feeling this is a lot longer than that. And as I said, the characteristics and fundamentals that have shaped his team over the years seem to be missing, and that's the biggest worry in that. But again, there's also the other side is bet the devil you know, because there is absolutely no one obvious. And I sound like your most generic football fan. Don't make a change because there's no other option. But in this case, I am totally void of any ideas of who you would get to come in. And like I said, I don't believe that the SFA have their eyes over world football, knowing who the best young manager who would take the opportunity to come in for a World Cup campaign. I just don't believe that's really there.
I'm trying to think that if you're going a bit of left field appointment, I know that Willie Sagnol had done quite well at Georgia. They look quite sprightly at the Euros. It certainly helps when you've got one of the best players on the planet in your ranks. And I think that there's a bit of flash in the pan, but the Iceland, I was impressed with Iceland last night. As I said, I liked the way they popped it around. They
really went to the obvious football fans. I'm saying you can't replace with anyone, and you've just said they were good last night, so get in.
Listen, I don't play Football Manager anymore. It's not my job to know these things. It's not my job to know these things, but it does feel like as I mentioned earlier, having worked for Scotland, and it's been brilliant. You know, the boom times have been class. You mentioned that Spain game there. Hampden, to get a ticket to Hampden, they were actually difficult to come across.
Yeah.
Games to go and watch Scotland, certainly in 2022, 2023, they were great fun. Great fun. That night at Georgia, where the game was delayed by over an hour because of the floodlights, because of the flooding on the pitch. That was brilliant. You know, and that's a real sense of spirit and a real sense of you're just so in love with this group of players and what they were trying to achieve there. And it feels, I know it's last night's not a good barometer. It wasn't a competitive game. End of season, dead rubber friendly against Iceland. Not many people are excited to go and see them. But seeing particularly in the Rangers and Celtic end, about five or six sections with no one in them, just think this wouldn't have been the case a couple of years ago.
Yeah. And there's to go back to the management question, one thing I would think as well is maybe rolling the dice is a good way to go, because I just don't see how under Clarke we're going to do this. Now, I just can't picture it for us to go and win. And now it's like you'd lose another tournament with this group of players that are good, so you as well not rolling the dice. I just cannot picture us making it under Clarke, and that's not really. It's a tough ask anyway. When you've not got the country behind you, not got the momentum there, it feels like we're losing all the things that we need to do something that was maybe slightly unlikely anyway.
Yeah.
So we probably do need to just take a risk and do a shot in the arm and just see if we can ride a wave. Because there's good enough players that if there is a wave, that it could build into something. You know, that's a humanly possible event.
Certainly, yeah. I would never have expected us to have this rock and roll a qualifying campaign as we did. And I've seen, I reading a wee quick through the match, a wee quick read through the match thread on Pine Bovril when I woke up this morning, just to see what people were saying about it. And I saw some people that were quite dismissive of the qualifying campaign. So they were saying, yeah, we stumbled our way into the tournament. You know, the latter half of the group stages was pretty mediocre. We only qualified because Spain won. It's like, no, we qualified because we were absolutely superb in the first half of it. That's how these things work. You know, we got there entirely of our own merit. You know, when we beat Norway away, Georgia at home, like Spain at home, we did that all in our own merit. So there has been good times. I feel as though it's you mentioned there about the World Cup could be the last chance for some players. I think Andy Robertson's still got a wee bit of time left in him, but you know, he's 31 now. He's got 1 year left in his Liverpool contract. Not 100% sure where he's going to move after that. There's talk that he might go to Celtic, which is great. Brendan Rodgers got a problem now how to get Ciaran Tierney and Andy Robertson.
I'm up for that. Just up for just seeing that.
Who cares if it's Brendan Rodgers' problem? But it feels like it would feel like a missed opportunity. You know, everyone that just like 2 years older, and it comes to the next Euros, everyone's 4 years older. Then you'll have McTominay, 32. McTominay wasn't that great last night, but I'd put that down to just fatigue and a number of things.
Smoking.
It just feels like scunnered is the word I would use at the moment, Tony. I know that's not the most analytical thing to say.
No, I think that probably is how the country feels after last night. It's like it was another performance too much. And I think it's we're starting getting to the last of the people that will of Clarke's defenders and the shtick that people have disliked about Clarke the whole time, which isn't everything, because Clarke's done a good job.
Yeah, Clarke's done a really good job.
But the things that are now great and more than anything, and they are superseding the every other part of the job, and that also becomes a problem because he's now casting a shadow over the team, whether he likes it or not. That's just the way it is. That's what's happened, and it does feel like end of days. But the one bit I hope I'll say is that he has done it before. He has done it before, and if we get Doak back in it next season, then it does change things, because Doak can win us a game where we can be shit. Because that Croatia game at Hampden that we won, that's one of the better teams in the world. Scotland weren't spectacular in that. For us to normally beat Croatia at Hampden, it would take a really, really good performance. It wasn't that. It was a half-decent performance with not a lot of errors, and then Ben Doak rinsing the Man City left back. You know, that's
Yeah.
really what that became. So that is another option for us, but it's that we're now relying on very, very thin threads, is what I would say.
No, I can't really disagree with that. So I suppose, is there anything else to be said about Scotland 1, Iceland 3?
Bring on Monday.
Yeah, and speaking of Monday, I think myself and Craig Cairns are going to be in a shoot podcast on the full-time whistle. Craig and I will be getting together to give us our thoughts on Liechtenstein versus Scotland, and I think that, I think this is pretty obvious. If we don't win that game, I think that's curtains.
Yeah, that'd be one of the most embarrassing results in our history, whether it's friendly or not.
Friendly or not, I think it maybe. Do you remember the game? Was it back in like 2008, 2009, where we needed a Stephen McManus header in the 98th minute to beat them?
I was watching that in a pub in Alloa, of all places, with my dad, my stepdad, and it was grim. Yeah, very grim.
Yeah, it's unthinkable. Losing to a team of Liechtenstein's calibre is absolutely unthinkable. So if we, God forbid, it doesn't happen, hopefully we can. It's hard to see given the calibre of opposition, but I really hope we see a strong performance and gives us something to cling on to as we build towards these World Cup qualifiers. And I don't know what he's got in mind for it. Say if maybe I can't imagine Slicker will play again. Maybe it might be for his own good that he's taken it there. Or maybe Slicker might say, like, I want to play just to get that game out of his system. If Ciaran Slicker starts,
I think I'll be making that decision, son.
I just like you're going to get picked for Scotland. You're going to get picked for Scotland. You're going to get picked for Scotland. But will Kieran Bowie's play? Will we get to see Lennon Miller start from this? Because if you're going to bleed in these guys, it's the perfect opposition to.
I think I would go with, if I was Clarke, I would go for Bowie. Simply, obviously, not just because obviously I'm a Hibs fan and I like him, but he's an enthusiastic player, and he's a really physical player, and he'll throw himself about, and he's very all action, and I think that's what needs in these types of games, is someone to be doing that and to that enthusiasm and bleed into other players.
Yeah,
I think they're the type of players that you need to use in these types of matches. So that is somewhere that's a line I would definitely go down.
I think we made a mistake in not calling up Simon Murray.
Yeah, well,
I'm kidding on. I'm kidding on.
I mean, tomorrow, Liechtenstein, Murray would be perfect for the reasons that I just listed.
Somebody just to lead for the front and just get the team going and just like charge into.
That's what Dykes does a lot of the time. A lot of the time, it's not that he's done something brilliant, but it's just that he's slammed into someone or he's won an unlikely header and it doesn't go to anything. But they think, well, we can't get up the pitch. Come on, and then everyone's all right. But so maybe Simon Murray would have saved Steve Clarke's career. Who knows?
Did we create many chances? I can't really remember. Actually, I tell you, their goalkeeper had a really good game.
For the Hurst save for the header, but when you watch the replay, that header's not great.
Yeah, but I think there was the one that he had where he managed to dig out a chance. I think it might have been Robertson or Tierney that played or McTominay. It was one of them that played the ball to him from an angle, and it was sort of behind him, and he managed to sort of dig out a shot, and the goalkeeper made a really good save. He was actually the best player in the park. That was a really funny moment. I mean, I say it reminded me because I wasn't alive to see it, but when Nat Lofthouse was playing, the goalkeeper could catch the ball, and you could just shove the goalkeeper into the net. There was a boy. There was a boy sitting a couple of seats across from me when I can't remember who it was. It might have been Hurst. Basically, like charged into the goalkeeper to shove him into the net. It's like, referee, the ball's behind the line. Sir, that might be the case.
It's not the be all and end all of this scenario.
Man. Well, Tony, I think we'll leave it at that. But that was good to catch up with you, and hopefully, Craig and I have got something positive to talk about when I see him on Monday night.
Brilliant, mate. I hope you have a lovely day. Enjoy yourself.
You too, Tony. I want to say thank you very much to everyone who subscribed to this podcast. Thank you for your continued support of the Terrace. It really means a lot to us. And as you say, we'll be back on Monday to talk about the Liechtenstein game, and there's loads more 10 out of 10 content coming straight into your ears, including something I believe where Joel Sked talks about Jamestown analytics. So that is not to be missed. Take care.
I'll slip into a coma together.
Yeah, brilliant. If you're struggling to go to sleep tonight, Joel's getting ASMR when he talks about the least interesting subject on the planet, analytics in Heart of Midlothian. Wow. Until then, we'll catch up with you soon. Bye. Oh no, forgot to say, enjoy your football, but unlike the guy sitting a couple of rows in front of me who was sending a very expletive-ridden message to his group chat about Steve Clarke, enjoy your football, but please do so respectfully. Bye.